I think we should start, Ken. What do you think?
I agree. Thanks, Maggie.
Okay, so before we get started, perhaps we can just do a really quick round of introductions. So just say your name and your church, where your church is located. I'm Maggie Shreve. I'm the moderator of the Constitutional Procedures Group, and I'm in downtown Chicago. I attend Fourth Presbyterian. So Walter?
I'm Walt Kovalek from Western Springs Presbyterian.
Let's see, Pat?
Pat Gronwald from Church of the Cross, Hoffman Estates.
Okay. Bev?
I am Bev Mayer. I am actually pastor's assistant at Knox Presbyterian Church, and I work closely with the Clerk of Session.
Great, thank you, Bev. Roberta?
I'm Roberta Gates, and I'm from First Presbyterian Church in River Forest.
Wonderful. Paul?
Paul Detterman, also First Pres River Forest.
Lori?
I'm Lori Ulrich from First Homewood, a former clerk.
Wonderful, thank you. Margaret?
I'm Margaret Shrigley from Hanover Park, Christ Church in Hanover Park.
Great, thanks, Margaret. Steve?
I'm Steve Nipstein from First Presbyterian Church in LaGrange.
Thank you. Terry?
Terry Moore, Clerk of Session, River Glen, Naperville.
Wonderful, thank you. Debbie?
Debbie Oates, I'm the Clerk of Session in Niles Community Church, and it's my first year as clerk.
Oh, yay. Thank you. Edward?
I'm Ed Wall. I'm with First Presbyterian Church of Homewood. I'm Clerk of Session and a former member, CS 6 years, of the Constitutional Procedures Group.
Yay. Thank you for your service, Ed. Michelle?
I'm Michelle Vickery, and I'm the Clerk of Session at Community Press in Clarendon Hills.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think, Joan, I think you're last if I haven't missed somebody.
Joan Duchesne from Knox Presbyterian Church, and I've been clerk. This is my second year as clerk. I work closely with Bev Mayer.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we're so glad you're here today. If you will, I'm going to begin, then we're going to turn it over to Ken, then we're going to come back to me. And let's open with prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for this time together. This new city that we live in called Zoom makes it hard sometimes, but it also is a way to connect. We pray that you be with us as we walk through what it means to take good records and to make sure that we're doing the will of the church and of you. We ask you to continue to bless us in this work and to make us and the people in our congregations feel connected at this difficult time. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Wonderful. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the agenda for today. It's not a long agenda, but it may take some time. So, and I'll tell you why in a second. There we go. So this is a session records review, and we're going to be doing this in recording so that people could look at this later and make sure that they understand the way in which our presbytery has decided to fulfill the function required by the Book of Order. So the agenda for today is pretty simple. We did our introductions and our opening prayer. We're going to talk a little bit about the morning and how to use Zoom. We're going to do a really quick breakout session, and you're going to be paired with 2 other people, or maybe 3. And the question we're going to ask you to discuss is, what have you and your church learned in the last 8 months? And we hope it's something positive. And then Ken's going to go through the entire session review form with us. We would like to take your questions as we go. So that's one reason for me explaining the Zoom functions. In case you want to raise your hand, you can either do it visually like I'm doing now, or you can use a little button on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen. The next steps in the process will be close to our close. If there's some of you that are ready to pair up and have a conversation about your review process, then we can do that today. If not, we can wait until you're ready. And then we'll ask one of you if you'd be willing to close us in prayer. So are there any questions about our morning?
Maggie, I just texted Eric, and he was not planning to come, so he was surprised that I told him you thought so. So it was not,
Okay.
not a mistake. He just wasn't planning to come. Thanks.
Not a problem. You're here, right? So we're good. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at that, the tray at the bottom of your screen. You should see a little icon that says participants. And right now I see that there's 17 of us. And when you go into the participants box, if you click on it, you should see
Maggie,
your name.
you have to on-share your screen so we can do all that.
No, I see it
You
even
should
with
see it
the
on top of it. You should be able to do that on top of my screen, Ken.
You
I
just
can't.
have to hover at the bottom.
Okay. Okay.
Everybody got it?
Yep.
All right. So if you look at your name, you'll see the mute button, you'll see the camera button. The camera says more, there's chat, there's stop video, there's spotlight. I wouldn't worry about that. But under more, there's also an applause icon, there's a thumbs up icon, and there's a thumbs down icon. We're not doing any voting today. So you don't really need to worry about the up or down, the yes or no. But if you want to raise your hand that way, you can. If not, then I would just suggest if you're going to leave your video on, which we appreciate, because then I feel like I get to know you a little bit, just raise your hand and then Ken, Chris, or I will try to notice and make sure that Ken stops and then goes through the answer to whatever question or comment that you have. Okay? That's really the only rule for today, unless I'm forgetting something, Ken. Okay, so I will stop share. And I think it's your turn, Ken. Or we're gonna do the breakout now. Right, okay. So we're gonna do the breakout now. So Chris is gonna put us in randomly selected small breakout rooms. We'll be in the rooms for 5 minutes. So it won't be a really long conversation, but we do wanna get to know each other just a little bit, and we thought that question might bring out some interesting results. So the question again that you're talking about is, what have you and your church learned in the last 8 months?
So Maggie, did you want the 5 rooms? That's 3 to 4 per room? Okay.
Yep.
All right, here we go.
Maggie, a quick question. What is our target length for this meeting?
Noon.
Oh, 2 hours.
10 to noon, yeah.
Okay.
We may be done sooner, but
Okay. Thank you.
okay, thanks.
We used to do these meetings at Lead, but that's long gone.
So you will need to click on join in order to go to the room, Paul. You'll need to click on join. Ed, are you still with me?
Yay, welcome back.
They should use that timer for the Trump Biden.
To know your partners just a little bit better. I had a fun time with my group. Anybody want to report out something that their church has learned quickly? Okay.
All right, let's just say that we have learned that worship can be done away from the sanctuary very effectively on a virtual basis with, we're using YouTube and our church website. And we build a worship service on that every week.
Very good.
Anybody else?
We've learned that it was interesting that we're not live streaming a replication of the service. We're actually doing something. It almost looks like a package where we're actually doing things where there's skits and other things involved. So it's really an edited piece that then releases at a certain time on Sunday. And we found that that's been really effective to get people excited and engaged. And we're able to bring in messages from families, et cetera. So that's been something that I think we'll carry forward.
Wonderful.
Hey, can I ask Roberta to share what she shared in our small group?
Well, Paul, I was telling them about the satellite groups where someone volunteers a house and invites 6 to 8 people from the church to come and watch the service together.
All masked, right? Masks. And
We wear masks, and it's been really a good experience.
That's great. Yeah, I'm just amazed at how we're finding ways to connect. I think it was a struggle at first, but I am getting so much more comfortable with reaching out and finding new ways. My home church in Cincinnati, they had people not watching the service, but doing Sunday school classes in backyards. Now that's obviously going to stop, but it was kind of fun. Same thing, 6 to 8 people socially distanced in a backyard. I think it's great. Joan, did you want to say something?
No, we just agree that worship. We found that worship happens outside of the church building. That the building is nice to have, but it is not a necessity for worship.
Yeah.
We have also found we do coffee hour after church pre-pandemic. So we've now gone to opening up a Zoom session right after church, 15 minutes after the postlude. And then one tech person breaks out into small groups of 6 or 8 people. And that's been received really well of people at their homes, being able to visit with other people in their homes.
Very nice.
The church that my daughter serves in North Carolina has created happy hour on Thursday afternoons at 4 o'clock. And it literally is a great break in the week for people. They get together for, you got it, Ken. They get together for an hour, and she's got goofy questions that they all sort of share, responses to. And the congregation that was really kind of struggling to know each other before is finding this to be a really cool way of drawing closer together.
It just warms my heart, frankly. I don't think any of us thought technology was going to be the future of our faith existence, but I am surprised, and we have pivoted well, Presbyterians. So,
Not to be any of a downer, but there was a very meaningful blog written about the toll that IT and virtual is taking on pastors across the country, not just Presbyterian pastors, things they were never signed up for, whether they've been there 20 years or 2 years, and the amount of caring and concern that needs to be exhibited toward them needs to go up a notch, given that depending on how involved they are personally in producing, whether it's YouTube or Zoom-wise, these events that they never signed up for. So I don't know if you've all seen that. I can send it to Chris, but it's an important reminder. So
I haven't seen the blog. However, I will say that having an interim pastor during this time has kind of added to our challenges, but we feel that it's been handled real well. But we had actually had a discussion about that very topic during our last session meeting. It was a topic on the agenda.
One of the things that we've, because we also have an interim pastor, but long before the COVID thing started, he already was functioning very differently than our called pastor had been before. So we had kind of, regardless of the COVID thing, had already had to take over a lot of the things that we traditionally had thought a pastor would do. So that hasn't really changed. But one of the things that we've been able to do since this COVID thing that our pastor has been able to do is things like opening a private Zoom room for a specific amount of time for people who want to come for prayer. We've had a prayer table a couple times, and that worked out very well as long as everybody that was doing it understood. And it was something that the pastor was willing to put into the mix, because he's not one of the people that's doing the tech stuff, the digital stuff. I mean, he is still doing a sermon, but he just records the sermon and he puts a service together, and then he turns it over to somebody else to do. So it's different, but the things are getting done, and he has found ways to do pastoral duties through the digital stuff as well. So it's been a very interesting growing thing, but yeah, it really does change the the responsibilities. No pastor thought they were going to have to be doing all this digital stuff. You know, that's not what you signed up for. I get it.
I would encourage that I've got 4 women that I graduated from McCormick with, and we're having monthly calls just to check in with each other. And I think if your pastor hasn't found a way to do that, because my discovery with them is that they're all working twice as hard as they did before. And I do think that is one of the downsides of moving everything to a virtual platform. So encourage your pastors to find some other people that they socialize with that can commiserate with them about it. I think Pat had something to say.
I have a good friend who is a pastor in another presbytery, so I feel free to talk about her. And she said, I never signed on to be a televangelist.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what she misses most is the emotional feedback of being with people.
Right.
And I think we may not, we think about the mechanics of what is being demanded of our pastors. But I think it's also important to realize that they miss the personal connections just like we do.
Right.
No one to shake hands with after the sermon, good or bad, right?
Right. And you're all leaders in your congregation, so you can help support that pastor find some other ways to get relief too. But I love the fact that it came up at a session meeting. I think that's good. That's ideal. So we probably should move this along so that Ken can get through the review. But thank you. We thought the conversation might loosen you up a bit and prepare you for asking questions when you have them. And like I said, Chris and I will be kind of watching out for your hand in case you have a question, and we'll get Ken's attention so he can respond. All right.
Thanks, Maggie.
You're on, Ken.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank you all too on behalf of the Presbytery, since I'm now a full-time Presbytery staff person, which I've never been my whole life. So a word of thanks on behalf of the Presbytery staff for all of you and the efforts you're putting forth in this strange time. Like you said, Maggie, it just warms your heart to see and hear what is happening in this challenging time. That's for sure. I'm going to share my screen as we did earlier, and so you'll see the review sheet. We call it, has various names. It's the session records review sheet. And a word about this before we start. We used to, years ago, have a grading sheet that we attached to this. And if you did really well, you might have got a 90 or an 80. And then if you did, I want to get rid of that and dispel that understanding of what this is. This is not a grading sheet. This is not a, yay, you're a good clerk, or you're just a mess as a clerk. This is a way we want to encourage our congregations, our sessions, to be communities of faith, hope, love, and witness, as the Constitution of our church says. That's the focus of this. How are we as congregations fulfilling the great ends of the church, which I know you all have memorized, the great ends of the church, and especially that last one, the exhibition of the kingdom of heaven to the world. The focus, the marks of the church, that is their communities of faith, hope, love, and witness. So it's not just a checklist. Okay, we did that, we're done, move on to the next task. How are we being faithful to God, to Christ, to the Spirit? How are we being faithful to our tradition, right? The buildup of our church tradition that we hope is faithful to God, Jesus, and the Spirit as we seek to be faithful in these days. So that's the broad view of this, and the checklist, if you will, the review list is a fairly good size reminder of how we do that in practical ways in the life of the church. So there's the sermon, the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God, I hope, and that's the undergirding all of this. So I hope you've all had opportunity to fill this out in your own settings. This is available on the Presbytery website. And let me just show you a bit about that. So if you go I'll get rid of this. If you go to the Presbytery website, all right, and you all have that memorized, of course, chicagopresbytery.org. You see that there. And then here's what it looks like. And we have a whole section here for you all called, it's resources. Now, it's going to be strange now here. Let's see here. Why is this doing this, Chris?
I think it's just a little delayed, Ken, because you rolled over it a couple times.
Yeah, I'm just going to go a little slower and
A
stop.
little slower, yeah. There, yeah, it was there. There it is.
It says,
Use the
There it is.
yeah,
use the arrow.
use my arrows.
The arrows on this.
Oh, here.
No, the ones
No.
on the bar. Yeah, use that instead. There you go.
Oh, these little arrows. Okay.
There's your resources.
Okay, and then resources for clerks. Okay, thanks, Chris.
You bet.
And then if you click on that, right, you will see year-end reports. Now, don't worry about those yet. That's coming in the next couple months or another week or so. That's for last year. These reports are things we ask you for. You've hopefully seen that before. And then you scroll down some more. Newer clerks can click on this, get some refresher. This is a simple guide for what it is to be a clerk of session. And of course, if you need help with the Book of Order, Robert's Rules, help with other stuff, you're going to scroll way down to see templates. And here we have various templates that you might, if you want a kind of a basic review of what session minutes look like, there you go. A review of what we hope to have in session meetings, it's right there. Congregational meeting minutes, right there. And then finally, at the very bottom, is this session records review sheet. And you click on either one of those. If you want to do it online on your computer, click on the dock, because that will then bring up it'll download it, and then you can open it. And there it is. Okay, so that's and I'm going to go back to, I have it in a Word separately. So that's how you get to that review sheet. And here I have it just a little bit bigger. So if you need help with that, you can call me at the Presbytery office or Chris, email us. We're glad to help you with any of that. And Maggie and Chris are watching for questions, so just interrupt me if there are any. So obviously church name and then years of minutes. You can use one sheet. If you have 2 or 3 years of minutes, that's fine. Use one sheet and, go for it. So the basic simple items here that we're asking, items to be recorded in minutes of session. Please cite up to 2 examples. We don't need every single example of how you opened a meeting and it has the date and the time and whether it's special or a regular meeting. Just give us a couple examples. But it's important to know that. One of the rights of members of organizations in Robert's Rules have 4 basic rights. And it's just to have these in mind as clerk. The first right is the right to know, K-N-O-W. So people should know when a meeting takes place. So you send out a meeting notice. If they miss the meeting, they have the right to know what happened at the meeting they missed. And that's one of the reasons why we have this, that in minutes you would record the date, time, place of each meeting, and what was the focus of that meeting. Was it a special meeting or was it a stated regular session meeting? And you just put a couple of pages there, you know, page 1 and page 15 of your minutes show that. Sessions are to meet quarterly, at least. You can meet more
Ken,
than
we have a
quarterly.
question from Mark.
Go ahead, sure.
You said page, the page from the permanent record or the page of the individual meeting or the individual minutes?
Yeah, I think we would prefer, Mark, the page of the official year minutes.
Oh, okay.
So what I do, and here's what I do now, it's so much easier with computers because I have to submit my minutes to the synod, the Presbyterian minutes to the synod. So I take all of my minutes in a given year, put them in one file and say, file, call it whatever, 2018 minutes, Presbyterian minutes, full year or something like that, right? And then I go through and I tell the computer, the Adobe or Word, to renumber all those pages. And then I'm recommending the Presbyterian minutes. When I was elected to this position, well, actually the year before I was elected, Barbara Bundick, my predecessor, decided this. We were up to page 23,415. And we thought, well, that's kind of silly, So we changed the numbering system. So we just use the year and a hyphen and then a page number. So if you're doing your 2019 minutes, the minutes of the presbytery would say 2019-01, or just 1, 2019-2. And then we just keep adding that. We might get up to 2019-110 or whatever. And then the next year, we start renumbering again. So that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it that way, obviously. But as years go by, it's nice to kind of know, just by looking at a page number, the year of those session minutes and the page number.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Ken,
Yeah.
you want to say something about the reviewers' comments?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what there is, this page was set up, this sheet was set up so that you as a clerk would prepare everything on this side. See, where this gray bar, you prepare this side of the document. Then when we sit down with someone else and go through it, right? The idea would be we would have a meeting together. I would go through the sheet. We would then pair up into teams and clerks would then exchange minutes. So first we said, okay, let's do a review of my minutes. And we would go through, and if I'm reviewing your minutes, let's say we would just write a comment in there. Tremendous job with these minutes. That's what we like to see. Or don't forget this next year, or whatever we would want to put in there as a reviewer's comment. Good suggestion. Sometimes, and I've done this, I was not clear, especially it was a special meeting. And that's a parliamentary term. We have regular or stated meetings, the regular, or we have what we call special or called meetings. And the reason to stipulate that is, as you know, for a called or a special meeting, you can only talk about the items that were stated in the call that went out, the notice that went out for that particular meeting. So I missed that once. I just said that the presbytery met on blah, 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 blah. Well, the presbytery met in special meeting on da, 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 da. And then you'll see a little later on, the minutes, the sheet says to be sure to put in the reason for the special meeting. And that's limited, right? Yeah. So those kind of items might go in the reviewer's comments.
Ken, Margaret has a question.
Getting back
Margaret,
to
please.
Thank you. Getting back to the page numbers that we were just speaking about, are we still required to print all of our minutes, our annual minutes, into a, I can't remember if it's called a manual. It's a big binder. Are we doing
Yes.
it all digitally, or are we still printing all of our minutes?
Yeah, the Presbyterian Historical Society, we try to follow their recommendations, and they're very big on paper, especially the archival paper that's contained in those books. So the recommendation is, yes, that you print them, right, into a book or into something that is a kind of a permanent official record. Now, I know we're all using computers. Here we are. We have all this technology. Technology changes, you know, as time goes by. Some of you might remember those great big 10-inch floppy disks when they really were floppy, you know. Then they went down to 4, and they went down to 3.5, then we went to thumb drives. You know, all of this changes, but the Historical Society is convinced that paper lasts. And we have paper, 200 years old of paper. So my suggestion is, yes, that you get those books, or have at least one of those books. You can reuse those books. They're kind of pricey. The paper on there is archival quality. And like I said, we have some documents 200 plus years old and more in Philadelphia in the underground vault of our Presbyterian Historical Society that's lasted for you know, centuries. So I would recommend, yes, you commit them to paper. You don't have to keep buying new books each time, but you do need you could take them out of the book, put them in an archival box, label the box and say, these are our minutes from, you know, 1960 through 1980. You store that box in a fireproof vault, or you could send that box to the Historical Society. They will preserve it for you.
No, right there, the yellow.
Excuse me one second, folks.
The yellow paper and pen.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just
Got a family question here. So anyway, so yeah, so I would say, yes, please print it out. So it is somewhat of a permanent record, and store it somewhere. Now, you can certainly have all kind of backups and reference copies and other copies that is in your computer, right? But the official minutes, I would recommend be committed to real paper. My friends laugh at me in other industries, but I think that's important. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, all right, thank you all. So we talked about meeting quarterly. We obviously want to say who's there, who was present, who was excused. We want the name of the moderator. Number 4 is important, not because, okay, we're going to pray because the Book of Order says we're supposed to pray at the start of a meeting. We pray because we believe the Spirit is present and at work in us as individuals, and is particularly present when the community gathers, when any time a council of the church gathers. And so we remind ourselves of that, we lean on that, we depend on God to guide us in this particular meeting. So that's the reason why we open and close in prayer, and it's important that that be noted in our minutes. Approval of minutes, obviously, that's what we would do. Next meeting, minutes are sent out, or maybe they're passed out at the next meeting, and they're reviewed, and then they're approved. Now, so here's a clerky thing. So I do my minutes, right, for March, and then I'm at the April meeting, and someone says, "Oh, I want you to correct. I was present at that meeting, okay, at the March meeting, and it doesn't show that in the minutes." I go back and correct the March minutes, and then I say in the April minutes, the minutes were approved with amendment. Fred Smith was not marked present in the March minutes. But I make the correction in the official copy of the minutes. Otherwise, you would have to, if you wanted to pull those minutes, you would need to know, oh, I got to read the next minutes to make sure everything in these minutes was accurate. So I just go back and make the correction. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? It's a nuanced thing, but you want the official minutes to be correct. And if there's something that has to be amended, well, then just go back and fix it. If you want to note that, you could. Minutes updated, blah, 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 see April minutes, okay? If you want to be that precise. Otherwise, there's a mistake in the minutes, just you're the clerk. Fix the mistake, fix the correction, and then note that you did that in the approval of the subsequent meeting. Make sense?
And Ed has a question.
Okay, please. Ed, go ahead.
You need to unmute, Ed. You need to unmute.
Typographical errors. When people point out that there were typos in the set of minutes, I don't think that those need to be specified in the next set of minutes that there were typos.
Right, I'd agree, Ed. Like I said, I would just go back. You know, there's a typo in the February minutes, and that's discovered at the March meeting. Just go back and fix it in the actual minutes, right? And then that's your official copy, right? And then in the March minutes, say typographical errors.
It's corrected for typographical errors.
Correct, exactly, to be corrected. Boom. Yeah.
Ken, Terry has a question.
Yes. Okay.
From looking at this list, let's say you find something back from February's minutes. You didn't list the moderator's name. How would you do that? Correct that?
Yeah. Again, just go back and make the correction. Just add it in. Yeah.
Make the correction, but then in the current minutes, do I say, hey, I updated the January or February ones?
Yeah. In the current minutes, you know, when it comes to approval of the February minutes, you say February minutes approved with exception, add moderator's name, period.
I mean, even if it was something from 4 months ago, I can still correct it that way.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The hope is, you know, that it's the next meeting, people's memories fresh, you know, but things happen, you know, so yeah. Be bold with that and just make the correction, you know. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else on that? Minutes. Okay, thank you. So 7, we have financial reports, and important, as we all know, in any time, but for our own integrity, that ruling elders have a very up-to-date, full awareness of the financial life of the church, and that you regularly see a treasurer's report. I can tell stories, others of you I'm sure can tell stories of how people have missed the mark of the life that Christ would have us live when it comes to financial matters. And even in the church, I know that's not a shock to you. Paul might remember our years back in mid-Kentucky Presbytery. We had one of our church treasurers who thought he might make a little money for the church, and he withdrew money on the church's debit card, warning sign right there, took that to the Churchill Downs racetrack and thought he would make a little extra money for the church with the church's money. The way we discovered it was we saw withdrawals from the account of $102.95. You know, the $2.95 was the withdrawal fee from the ATM that was at Churchill Downs. And then, so we finally had to say to this man, that's not right. You can't be doing that. And he got all upset. And, well, I'm just trying to help the church. Well, you know, gambling with the church's money is not really helpful to the church. So that was discovered because ruling elders looked at the bank report, all right, that the treasurer provided. And he was mystified as to, oh no, he didn't provide it. We just went online and printed it. And he was mystified as to how we did that. And we said, well, it's all on the church's online portal into the Chase Bank or whatever. So you all should have, and the elders should have, and the presbytery has, of course, regular reports to what's happening with the finances. This one is a kind of a two-parter. One of the annual things that we ask sessions to do, in our tradition, a session authorizes the celebration of the sacraments. Pastor can't say, gee, let's have communion today. Okay, pastor might say that, that pastor is out of order. The session authorizes the Lord's Supper. Same with baptism. Gee, I think I'll baptize this baby today. That's not our tradition. Session says we approve the baptism of this child to happen on this day in this place. So when session does an annual approval of the Lord's Supper, usually once a year, we will celebrate communion on these dates. It's important, probably as part of your clerk's report to the session, to say the Lord's Supper was celebrated on October 1, World Communion Sunday. The Lord's Supper was also distributed following the service to the following homebound members, and maybe their names are there. So, so whenever there's sacraments, you want to have two things in mind. One, the initial approval of the sacrament, and then two, that happened. It's especially true with baptism, right? We might approve the baptism of this child 3 months earlier, right? But then you want to show in the minutes that the baptism actually occurred on this day, so that your record, so it's a consistent record. And sometimes we forget the second one, right? We approve the initial communion, we approve the baptism, but then we don't say it actually occurred. And it's important to also say that it actually occurred. Questions on that?
Margaret has a question, Ken?
I've been clerk 10 years or so, and we always stated the number of people attending at that. It's always the first of the month. And so we would have a record of the number of people who took the Lord's Supper, participated that day. And now with streaming, and we don't know how many. So I should still be, I'm thinking, and I'll have to go back and do this to 2 or 3 of the meetings, report that the Lord's Supper was celebrated, even though it was the pastor. We are streaming mostly from the pastor, from the manse, and we are, occasionally from the sanctuary, but not in person.
Right.
So it needs to be said, but the numbers don't need to be there. They wouldn't be there.
Right, yeah, and that, Margaret, that's actually, you're such a good clerk. That is a requirement from the former form of government that is actually no longer required, okay? I remember in my year, some of you too, we actually filled out communion cards, right? And those were handed in to the ushers or the elders, whoever, during the offering perhaps, and then communion was celebrated, because it used to be that the Book of Order, the Constitution required that. That requirement is no longer that specific. So it's fine if the session, if you want to continue to do that, there's nothing against it, right? But it's no longer a requirement for review of session records, let's say, or for if the Constitution requires it. The only requirement is that it was, note that the communion was celebrated. So you're free to do whatever you want to do with that. You could say it was celebrated and people partook of the elements in their own home, let us say, right. But it's no longer required to record the number of people. But
Ken?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Ken, a question from Paul.
Uh-oh.
You need to unmute, Paul.
Sorry, I thought I had already. No, it's my uh-oh. So hypothetically, if a particular congregation, I don't know, pick one, hasn't been doing the second part of this for, oh, I don't know, 15 years or so. How would you, I would guess that we would make the corrections on this year's minutes, because that's basically what we can do, asking for a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just, it's one of those things. I mean, I learned it not immediately, we just approved the dates, and the assumption was,
yeah,
it
happened.
Of course, had communion on those dates, but to be consistent, and it was one of those kind of minor things. It might have been a holdover from the years when we actually wanted to record the number, right? Because I've seen older minutes where it says, First Presbyterian Church meeting that day, and 30 people or 60 people submitted communion cards. And though, I remember filling out the card, right? And that was reviewed by the session. So to kind of follow through with that, we would just say, okay, communion was celebrated on this day. I suppose it's ever happened. Communion was supposed to be celebrated on this day, but the pastor was sick, and no one else was authorized to celebrate communion. So the elders decided that morning, okay, we won't have it today, we'll have next month, right? That should be known, right? So that should be recorded somewhere. So I think for that reason, we just say record it. And yes, I would just start with your 20 minutes, and then move forward.
I might add here that I like the review column on the right, even for the work that you and somebody else in your own congregation might do. If you noticed a pattern of something that was missing, and I'll give you an example. I remember reading minutes in the old format where there would be a sentence like, a quorum was present, but nobody said what the quorum was. So for example, if your quorum is 5 people, but you only listed 3 being present, then how was a quorum present? So that's another nuanced thing, but it was a pattern I noticed in this one church's records. And I just said, no, this needs to be stated. The quorum of 5 was met, and then you just make sure you've got those people there. So that's what I would use the review box for, is to say a pattern of something missing or a pattern of something present that you don't need. You could put it in there too.
Right. Very good. Yeah. Thanks, Maggie. I don't know if we talked about the quorum. Yeah, we did in number 1. So that might be another place to put, the quorum of 50% was met. We recently had one of our congregations that had a Zoom meeting and did not have a quorum, even on a Zoom meeting. So what I always recommend there is one, call the meeting off, just say we can't meet, or 2, take have the meeting, but then you have to make very sure that the session approves the minutes of the meeting where no quorum was present, okay? The minutes should say a quorum was not present. The decision was made to continue the meeting. So you continue the meeting, but you really can't implement those actions,
right? You can't do any official business
until the next session meeting, or a meeting called specifically to review those minutes, right? And then they're approved, because then once they're approved, you can go ahead and implement it. But that's if that happens, call me, and we can discuss the particulars of that. Yeah, I think someone else had a question.
Walt has a question, Ken.
This is a comment. I guess my take on what you just said, Maggie, not to be too picky, is it's in our bylaws what a quorum is in a session, half plus 1. So anyone who writes down a quorum was present and the count isn't correct of the listed members has made an error in the listing. There's no need to keep writing down how many people are in the quorum. It's just, for that meeting, it's a standard number. So I think that's sufficient.
I wouldn't disagree. I just think it makes it easier on somebody who's reading them who wasn't there to kind of know. It says a quorum of 5 was met. If it's in your bylaws, it's a solid number. You know what it is. And the only reason I bring this up, I've done a lot of work in nonprofits where the bylaws required something that the board was never meeting, and yet the board continued to function and act in its
So-
official capacity. And when that happens, the risk of mismanagement or non-management is great. So I
Sure.
bring it up just because I think it's an important thing to remember. You've got to have enough people there to
Right.
do the business of the church. So, yeah.
Right. Okay.
There is a
Okay.
question from Michelle, Ken.
Sure. Michelle?
Ken, could you just talk a little bit more about home communion? I understand now we don't have to have the numbers in the congregation. What do we need to put in our minutes for home communion?
Yeah, I would recommend, I think that's later in the review sheet.
Oh, well, I'm
no,
sorry,
no.
I didn't mean to jump ahead.
No,
Sorry.
no, because I said it here. So I would just put in, the Constitution, the Book of Order now has the provision where church officers can, what we call in the Constitution, extend the table. All right. So it's not a second or third or fourth celebration of the Lord's Supper. We are simply extending the table to those who happened they couldn't be there on Sunday morning, and now lo and behold, that's the case for everybody, right? So in non-COVID times, what I would do as a pastor is I would say to the deacons, they would schedule communion to homebound members certain Sundays. And I would say, please give me the list of those you are scheduled to visit that day. Okay, give it to me before the service starts. So then at the celebration of the Lord's Supper, as part of the prayers, I would include those individuals. They would be named, all right, and prayed for that day as the table is extended. So in the minutes, you could say, communion was celebrated on World Communion Sunday on October 1, 2019, let us say. The table was extended and communion was shared to the following individuals by the deacons, and then you just list their names. So as long as there's some mention of the fact that the table was extended, communion was shared, the elements were also distributed to, however, the language is however you want to do it, and then name those individuals.
Ken, there's a question from Mark.
Okay.
You want to name the people who participated in communion virtually?
Well, that's a good question. Now I would say no. I would include a catch-all phrase in these times to say communion was celebrated virtually in members' homes.
Yeah, well, we have communion once a month.
Okay.
And for many months, it's been,
sure, virtual.
It's been done virtually, and that's
Right.
the note that I've always put into the minutes.
That's good. Yeah, and just put that, and then it's known. Yeah. Okay, very good. You all great. This is good questions here. Good stuff. Okay, we said about the Lord's Supper. Same with baptism. Baptism, oftentimes baptism is approved early, right? Baby's born, and you visit it, and the family says, "Oh, we want to get our child baptized, of course. What day?" And then the pastor should bring that recommendation to the session and say, "I've met with the Smith family, and they have a new daughter, and it's wonderful. We want to schedule the baptism for, we're doing it today. Let's say non-COVID time. Schedule it for December 1." Okay. Well, then January minutes should say on December 1 or whatever, the baptism of so-and-so happened, right? Was celebrated with delight, period. And then, of course, you would put that in your church register. We'll get to that in a little bit, but you want an initial approval of the sacrament and then a follow-up. I actually had a baptism be canceled one day because of illness, right? Had to be rescheduled. So I made sure that the session knew that, and that was in part of my pastor's report, so that there was some consistency. We had to wait a couple months and then celebrate the sacrament of baptism. So 9 and 10 are of a similar thing there. Okay, 11, obviously one of the delights of a session is to meet with people who respond to God's call in their life and the leading of the Spirit and want to participate in the life of the church as active members. And so obviously the session meets for that. You do know the Book of Order allows for a much smaller quorum requirement for that, for the session meeting. I think it now says you need 2 ruling elders and the moderator. So technically, again, kind of non-COVID times, you could have 2 ruling elders, the moderator, and then a new individual or group of individuals or family or whomever to be approved for membership, accepted as new members into the church. And that's important too. So the session accepted, right, on profession of faith, these new individuals who shared some of their faith story with the session. There was joy and delight on that, obviously. That's the day their membership is official, the day the session takes the action. That action is then most often, with delight, celebrated at a worship service that's planned for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks out, whatever the schedule is, right? And that should be noted in the minutes, right? New members, the reception of new members will be celebrated on Sunday, October, whatever, right? And then again, the follow-up minutes might not be a bad idea to say, you know, worship committee report, we celebrated the reception of new members as noted in the prior session minutes or something like that. So kind of a similar thing. It happened on this day. That's the date of membership, okay? Not the worship celebration of that, right? That's needed and important and delightful, but the day of membership, if you want to get technical, starts when the session acts to receive those individuals as members. We added number 12 recently. Clearly, the session, as the local council, is responsible for the use of the building. Right? Nothing really can happen in a church building without the approval of the session, either annually or whatever. So, for example, I go back to the time when the AIDS crisis just started, and there were churches where I was serving up in upstate New York that refused to allow their building to be used for a funeral if the person died of AIDS, okay? Early days of this, people were very scared. I thought that was absurd. I talked to my mother, who worked in Social Security disability in those years and had a lot of people who were disabled because of the AIDS virus. She set my concerns at ease. I said to our session, I would like for us to say we would allow. And so the session voted and approved that, okay? Same thing for weddings in recent years. As you know, the church has made changes as to whether or not to allow same-gender, same-sex marriages in their facility. So this thing all came up again, you know. No pastor can say, I want to do a same-gender wedding in this church and I'm going to do it. That cannot happen unless the session approves the use of that sanctuary for the wedding. So it's a kind of a recent thing. It's kind of, well, of course the session approves use of the building. Yeah, and because of recent changes in our Constitution, the session must say whether or not they will permit it. And as you know, some of our sessions have said, yes, we'll permit it. And others of our sessions have said, no, we will not permit it. And there's a variety of opinions and options on that. But the important reminder is number 12 there, the session approves the use of the facility for a wedding. We might also say for a funeral, but that's kind of a given. If a church member dies, non-COVID times, we want to have a funeral. You don't have to call a special session meeting to allow the use of the building, all right? For a wedding, usually that's planned months and months ahead of time, and so you have the opportunity to say you approve the use of the building. Questions on that, concerns, comments? Okay, excellent, thank you all. Again, I'm available, call. Chris is available, call. Maggie, call. You know, let us know your questions. One of the privileges of serving as a ruling elder in a Presbyterian church is you are Certain of those elders are elected as commissioners for presbytery meetings. You know, we're big on parity, ruling elders and ministers of the word. We try to be 50-50 on that. And so that's important that sessions vote to say, Susan and Tom and you two are the elected ruling elder commissioners to the Presbytery Assembly meeting. You can do that once a year. You can do that meeting by meeting. It's nice. Some ruling elders, commissioners like it because they serve a term of that and they kind of get to know how the presbytery works. So totally up to you, but important that they're elected and important that they report at the next meeting. You know, we work hard in the presbytery office to produce what we call the summary of the meeting, and that's published. I think we just sent out, Chris, right, the recent one. I think Dennis just sent that out recently, Dennis Cobb, our communications manager. So they could bring that report, you know, highlight that, but somewhere in the minutes it should say, Fred and Sue reported to the session the actions of the Presbytery of Chicago Assembly meeting that occurred on September 15th, 2020, something like that, you know. And just give folks a sense of what happened, what actions were taken. We received 2 new pastors. We sold a building, you know, whatever recent things happening. It's good to kind of report that. And then,
we have a question?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please. Yes.
Do the minutes need to reflect any of the details, or is it just the general statement?
Yeah, just a general statement that it was reported. Yeah, yeah. And you know, you might say, as clerk, I would love this. A summary, the published summary of the meeting will appear in the next church newsletter. Right? I used to do that when I was a pastor at Carter. When the summary came out, I would say, oh, it's a 2-page summary. Let's put that in the newsletter. So folks at home, and some are interested, some could probably care less. I don't get that, but you know, that's the real. Or you could say the summary was distributed to the session members, and maybe that kind of covers it, whatever you want to say. But you know, we do go to the work to produce the summary, and so important that that then be shared out in the presbytery. Everybody who's on the presbytery email list will get it, okay? But it doesn't always then get to the folks in the pews who may not be involved at all. So, or a lot of our session members, if they're not commissioners ever, they might not be on our email list. So, you know, we like things to be shared like that. So, and then you want to sign. Now, again, the Book of Order used to require the signature of the moderator and the clerk. That's no longer required, but your signature as clerk is required, okay? You want to have the moderator sign? That's fine. Do what you want, but at the very least, your signature. Now, what I would suggest is you just sign each page of minutes, each at the end of each month in the official copy, right? I mean, again, we're talking the official, permanent, preserved historical document of the church that your signature appears at the end. So you might have to sign your name, I don't know, 12 times. Or, and I've done this for presbytery, I write up what I call an attestation page. I would say, you know, once the minutes are kind of in one packet of material, I say the minutes of the Presbytery of Chicago, which begin on page 2020-1 to 2020-501. In this packet are the complete and accurate minutes of the presbytery. And then I say attest, and I sign my name, and my name is typed, you know, I type my name at the bottom. So then there's a signature, it's just a separate signature page that says to anybody reading those minutes, these are the minutes. We have a lot of ecclesiastical weight in the church, those of us who are clerks, right? And so any attestation that you make as a clerk, that those are the accurate minutes, that's accepted in the church as the full and accurate minutes, or an excerpt of the minutes, right? This is an excerpt of the minutes from page blah, blah, blah. I attest these are accurate, and you sign it. That's considered, you have authority with that. Question?
It's from Debbie Oaks.
Yeah, I was going to ask if the signature could be electronic, but I think you answered that. And so if we have a signature line at the end of our minutes for a certain meeting, is that sufficient just to sign on that last page?
Yeah, that's sufficient as long as it refers to the whole of the document. Electronic signatures, we're getting more and more into that. Chris and I and the press office are exploring that. So yes, as long as it's signed electronically and it's noted, right? I've noticed too, certain letters now I get or send, it says transmitted by email, okay? And then there's all kind of DocuSign, right? Electronic things. Yes, as long as that's noted, this document was signed electronically, you know, something like that. Again, you want to make sure that people, the right to know, right? People have the right to know these are the full and accurate minutes. So however you want to sign it and note that it's signed electronically, or you can see it was signed in ink, however you do it is, I think, fine. Okay, thanks, Debbie. Yeah. Okay, friends, moving right along. This next section is kind of a once a year thing. So you don't have to worry about each meeting, right? But once a year, these things we think are important should happen for our being communities following the leading of the Spirit, communities of faith, hope, love, and witness. So again, as we said earlier, you know, the March of the Church, right? Basic 3 of them that now appear in chapter 3 of the Form of Government, or chapter 2. Anyway, it's one of those. The right preaching of the word, right? That's an important mark of the church. The word of God is preached. The right celebration of the sacraments, right? And used to call it church discipline uprightly administered. And we kind of tweak that in our language and say that the community of disciples is nurtured, right? So preaching, sacraments, and nurture of the community. So one of the ways, of course, we show that we are the church is the session says we're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper, and we're going to celebrate it on these days. And so we list those and they're approved. So that's that one. And also, who was asking earlier about homebound members, that be included. So this, say in, maybe it's in December for the following year, or it's whenever it is. The following dates were approved by the session for the celebration of communion. You might list the monthly dates and then say the deacons are planning or plan to bring communion to homebound members on these dates. And you might list those 3 or 4 or 5 dates, you know, okay? That's approved. And then you've covered, if you will, the approval for the regular celebration of communion, and you've approved the extension of the table on these particular dates taken by authorized church officers. And that could be deacons, ruling elders, those who are no longer in active service, right? Once an elder, once a deacon, always, unless you're ordained to some other office in the church. So ruling elders who are no longer on the session, deacons who are no longer serving on the board of deacons are still ruling elders and deacons by their ordination. And so they're authorized to bring the Lord's Supper to homebound members as they're willing and able. Questions? Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, important that we train, examine newly elected ruling elders and deacons. So the best way, I think, for this to happen is, again, ordinary times. The nominating committee meets and they make certain recommendations. They encourage people to answer God's call in their life by serving. The congregation has a meeting November to say we elect these individuals to serve as deacons and ruling elders starting January 1 or February 1. Then the session meets with those individuals. And what I like to do is, those are some of the most moving meetings in my years as a pastor, is say, let's share some of our faith. Let's share a word about how the Spirit is active, has been active in your life. and what led you to say yes to the call of this church to serve as a ruling elder and a deacon. And then you talk. And that is the understanding of the examination of newly elected ruling elders and deacons. Doesn't mean you're giving them a Bible content exam. You know, in Nehemiah 3, what does it say? No, it is, how do you feel the call of the Spirit in your life to be involved in the life of the church at this time? Those of us who are pastors, well, others of you have heard that. Those are amazingly faith-inspiring meetings. It's important that you say that happened in your session meeting, okay? And the timing is important, right? Especially the examination part, right? Because it would say so-and-so was elected by the congregation, but before they are ordained and installed, this time of training, right? So there's some church officer training scheduled. Or you could say the church officer training is scheduled for February 15, and the newly ordained or the newly elected church officers will be participating in that training opportunity. But I think more important is the examination part, right? This happens very sequentially for those of us who are ordained as ministers of the word and sacrament. There are several examination requirements we have to fulfill. At the same token, though it's not as codified, there are still training and examination requirements for ruling elders and deacons, okay? It should just be automatic, but some opportunity for examination. And I use that word loosely. Examination, I would hear as faith sharing, right? Faith celebrating, discussion, right? By newly elected ruling. And then you say the session says, okay, these people have been elected by the congregation. They've been examined by the session. Training is happening here, and it's also going to happen here. Then the session would approve the date of installation and ordination. Okay, that's kind of the sequence, right? That this would, by the book, occur. Okay, questions, comments, concerns about that? Okay, thank you. It's crucial. And then obviously to be recorded in the minutes that you ordained people, you know, and you installed them into office. Now, sometimes here again, non-COVID times, I don't necessarily, I would say one would need to be present to be ordained. Okay. Now we're doing it by Zoom, and the Spirit uses all of our devices and things. So when we ordained and installed Lottie, for example, at Western Spring Church, there were only a couple people. Lottie was present, obviously. A couple other people were present, but the commission and the presbytery participated in the laying on of hands virtually through our Zoom call. And those who were there did the prayer and laying on of hands at some distance, and Lottie was ordained and installed. That's happening also tomorrow for David Black at First Presbyterian Church in Chicago, right? The minutes need to say, these ruling elders and these deacons were ordained and installed in these classes, and here's the information, okay? And then that's put in the church register, but the minutes need to say that. 19 we found was doubled. So anybody has a new number 19 we want to insert, you let me know and we'll hold that space open. Important that every year the session review the adequacy of the pastor's compensation. And we added the word other staff. Now, some churches have big staffs and some churches have very, very small staffs, but it's important for the session to review, you know, and say, well, here's the pastor's package. It meets the presbytery's minimum standards and reflects the years of experience our pastor has, you know. So some note to say that the session reviewed the compensation for the pastor and other staff. The session has the authority, of course, to approve changes in compensation for all staff except the pastors. And that requires the congregation approval, right? So it could say the presbytery reviewed this compensation of all the staff. The session approved 1% increase, 2% increase, $1,000 whatever for these staff members. The session recommends to the congregation that the terms of the caster's call be changed to reflect a 1%, 2% raise in compensation, something like that, right?
And I think it's a question from Paul.
Sure.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. And so remember, session can do all the staff except the pastors, because pastors are elected by the congregation, and their terms of call, any change to a pastor's terms of call have to be approved by the session and the presbytery. And so that's important. So again, the session minutes should say that's happening, right? The next one, 20, we ask every year for you all as clerks to do what we call annual reports. And one of those annual reports is the annual statistical report, all right? And that's the one that I send you, Chris sends you. It's really a general assembly of the church, office of the General Assembly asks for, and that's how we kind of keep our accurate numbers. And so what we ask is, once you fulfill that, once you complete that report and send it in online, you can print out a copy of that report from the online system. And it's a PDF document. And so we ask that that document be printed only once a year, right? And then inserted into your minutes. And that way it shows that you successfully completed that report. You reported that to the presbytery. The presbytery sent it on to the General Assembly. And here are your actual numbers for that year. So pretty soon, Chris and I will be sending out that request. And obviously, you kind of wait to the end of the year, right, to fill it out, because you're going to through 2020. So say in January, you work on that report and you send it in. Once you send it in, quote unquote, on the computer, you can print out a copy of that report you just sent in. It's a one-pager, and it's very neatly shows all of your kind of vital statistics for the congregation for the year 2020. Questions?
Ed has a question, Frank?
Sure.
This used to be what we call the two-page report, and they finally reformatted it so that it will fit on one page. And you got to remember to leave a blank page in your own minutes to insert this copy.
There you go. Very good, Ed. Yeah. Leave a blank page, add a new page. You know, I had some sessions. They had this lovely archival paper, right? But they just printed out a separate and I shoved it in there. You can reprint it on your nice archival paper. You know, feed that nice archival paper. You know, the one with the square holes, right? Rectangular holes into your printer and print out a nice copy. And then your minutes are all neat and in one kind of similar page, pageation and all that. So yeah, but you're right. It used to be longer. We got it onto one page. Some churches, please, Margaret.
Again, the average weekly worship attendance, we're doing not determined or something.
Right. We just got a note about that from actually the Office of the General Assembly this last week. Obviously, we can't do that. So instead of saying not do it, the General Assembly office suggested just please encourage churches to report that any way they want. So I don't know. You might want to consider what I've done, again, when I was at Carter Church in Skokie, is I looked at the number of views, right? I think you can do that in like Vimeo. I don't know how that works for Facebook or others, you know. You might just say we were not able to count, or a quick review of our worship attendance shows that so many people watched online. However you want to do it, it's going to be impossible because we can't stand there with a clicker like we could at the door, right? Or the ushers count. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. These are unprecedented times for those matters. We do want to have good people serving in various positions in the life of the church, and God has special gifts and a special place in God's heart for church treasurers and clerks of session. And so it's important that they be elected, okay? And so again, that's usually January, I would suggest. And the benefit of that is the treasurer gets used to saying every year he or she is hopefully re-elected. And then it gets to the fall of the year and they might say, I'm getting tired of this. I think it's time for a change. They might let the pastor know, or as clerk. So you have a little bit of time, to find someone else or train someone else, so that in January that person can take office. So this is important, I think, to be part of the annual kind of pattern of life of the church. Same with the clerk, right? Now, some of you, I know, if you've served as a clerk for, someone said 12 years, right? The Constitution says you can serve as a ruling elder active on the session for a total of 6 years. Then you must rotate off for at least 1 year. I know my mother for many years. She's a very small church I grew up in. She served for 6 years. She took a year off, but she was still the clerk. But in that year, she didn't have voice or didn't have vote on the session. She didn't like that, right? Now, I think they were forgiving because she had voice, right? She would speak at the meeting. They would say, Mary, what do you say about that? But she technically did not have a vote that year. And then the next year, they asked her to serve again. I think she served a total of 30 years, God bless her, right? Total as clerk, 6 years on, a year off, but not really, because, she was still the clerk. So you can do that. I don't know that my mom would recommend it. I would recommend it. But in some of our smaller member churches, that's the current reality. So just be sure you're upfront with that with the congregation. Yes, Chris.
Then there's a question from Mark and then a question from Maggie.
Okay, Mark, please.
I'm a member of the session as well as clerk. Is the clerk elected by the session or by the congregation? Or like me, you get it by default?
Yeah, the clerk is elected by the congregation. Okay. Now,
right.
my best encouragement. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. The clerk is elected by the session.
Oh, we froze.
But the requirement of the Constitution is 6 years.
Right.
You must rotate off.
Right.
So for that, say you're the 7th year, right? You're technically not a member of the session.
Right.
You can still be the clerk, but you don't have vote on the
Understood.
session. Okay. Next question you said, Chris?
I don't have a question. I just want to give you a time check, Ken. It's 11.
Okay, what do we got?
11:35. So we.
Oh
have
man, okay. We are pressing on toward the goal
Yeah.
of the upward call of God. Thank you.
Thank you.
Session approval of the budget, okay? Oh, look, we're almost done, see? Oh, no, we're not. Session approves the budget. Some congregations are under the misnomer that the congregation approves the budget. If you're in a Baptist church, the congregation approves the budget. If you're in a Roman Catholic church, the priest approves the budget. All right, maybe some others on the board. If you're in a Presbyterian church, the session approves the budget and then reports their approval to the congregation and encourages their faithful stewardship in support of the mission and ministry of the church, and the budget undergirds that. So just be clear. I've had this many times questioned. I thought the congregation approves the budget. Well, no. Some churches, yes. Presbyterian Church, you remember our system, right? The federal system of government is based on the Presbyterian system of government. There were a lot of Presbyterians in the early years of this country who had influence on how the country, the federal system is structured. It is a representative structure, right? So the session approves the budget. The budget should be reviewed, the finances should be reviewed by a committee of the congregation, and that's important for integrity. You may want to do a church audit or a church financial review. You're asked to do a financial review, and the only provision the Constitution says is the people doing that financial review can't be related to the treasurer by family, okay? Important to have an annual report, and many of our churches do this, and we publish that, deacons, and report that Sunday school happened, Christian education happened, etc. Okay, moving along as quickly as possible. We think it's important, and the Constitution now says there ought to be some document in the church that we could call a manual of administrative operations. So that I, as a new elder, could say, can I see the manual? That would tell me what the bylaws of the church are. That would show me the personnel policies of the church. That would show me who our insurance carrier is. That would show me maybe who our kind of regular vendors are. Some codified book, manual, file folder, computer file that says, here's kind of how we do the church, okay? This is a newer request and requirement in the Constitution. Used to be groups above the session had to have this. And then we said, you know, this is important. It might be a good that sessions have this also, all right? And I think it's more for historical continuity, all right? Ruling elders ought to know who's our insurance company. Do we have a child protection policy? Do we have personal policy? Ed, yes.
In Homewood, we do have a what we call a policy manual, and we review it every even numbered years. So
that's perfect.
That way we are keeping old language out or bringing new language in on a timely basis or reasonably timely basis. But boy, that does answer a lot of questions when you've got new people coming onto your boards and they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, that's an excellent. Let's all take that as a humble encouragement. That's excellent. So in our day, of course, in recent years, we are all the more concerned about boundary training, child and youth protection policies. These should be actual policies that the session read and approved. And they should be in the manual, right? This is how we go. This is how we work. Your insurance company can help with that. And as you all may know, this year in the state of Illinois, boundary training is required of all employers. And it's not been too enforced, but it is a state law. It took effect in January of this year. And my guess is as years go by, I think, Chris, it actually says sexual awareness training or sexual
harassment.
It's sexual harassment training.
Sexual harassment training.
So there's a specific piece that needs to be added now to any boundary training that is that specific sexual harassment. So the Presbytery, we are really trying to make our boundary training not be a punishment. We're trying to encourage healthy boundaries and healthy relationships. However, the state of Illinois now is telling us that no matter what we are trying to do, one portion has to be about sexual harassment training, and they have specific a checkoff list specifically about what has to be said. And you can get that by going to illinois.gov.
Actually, just so you all know, Ken and I talked this week about, I just finished a model employee handbook. So for a small company I was working for. So I'm going to share that with Ken, and we're going to see if we can sort of build out a template of what current law requires. And we'll pull that together, and maybe we can find a way to put that on the website. So that might be helpful to your congregations as a model.
Okay, thank you both. So that's why we put the word in development of, and we want this to be in process, and hopefully as time goes by, that's showing up. Same with insurance. Oh my goodness, you all know, right? We must have adequate insurance, so it's important that that be reviewed. I've noticed many policies are now 3-year policies, and so just make sure in your system you review that. And the minutes say, so-and-so and so-and-so reviewed the adequacy of our insurance with XYZ company and find it adequate, or we've asked to increase, or we've asked to add this or delete that, whatever, you know. You want to have that, that coverage. Number 32 is always fun. You know, we have members who are inactive, and boy, that's hard to really track now. But again, in non-COVID times, the session is encouraged to take effort to restore folks who are less active, that they might become more active in the life and ministry of the church. And so some articulation of those efforts is important, right? Not to satisfy the book of order, but we want people, you know, Hebrews, it says, don't forsake the assembly of yourselves together so that you may be strengthened, right? We think there's strength when the community gathers, even like this, but certainly when we can gather physically and be present. So what efforts is the session making? I had one church consultant, this was years ago in Louisville, Paul, maybe you remember, Herb Miller was a big kind of guru of church growth. He said the best thing you can do with your inactive members is exchange the list with your neighboring church and see if that will help, you know, bring them back to a church, because they most likely won't come back to your church, but statistics show they might come back to another church. So maybe that's a strategy, but some way to restore folks who are less active. Number 33 is kind of vague. Sessions review of commitment to inclusiveness and representation in decision-making and employment. This comes, again, it is part of the Constitution, part of the form of government. We want to be communities that are inclusive and welcoming of all people. And so however we can say that and do that, maybe it's in our employment practices, you know. There's a position open for church secretary, and we reviewed so many resumes, and certain of those resumes had people of people of color, African American, Native American, indigenous, you know, whatever, just to reflect somehow that we are trying to be inclusive of our greater communities when it comes to people who are of red and yellow, black and white. They are precious. We are precious in God's sight. Okay, that somehow the session is aware that that's important in the life of the church. That the community of the church should reflect the neighborhood, if you will. All God. My favorite, Paul. Right? I keep saying Paul because we know all God's children have a place in the choir. So we want to be welcoming of everybody. Okay, moving along. We're also asking you all to take minutes of the congregational meetings, right? And that occurs at least once a year, sometimes more. So as the clerk of session, you are most likely also the clerk for congregational meetings. So we have to meet once a year, so you let us know that. The presentation of the budget to the congregation, okay? And I don't mean the bottom line, I mean the full budget should be presented to the congregation, right? Not just the total personnel budget is. Here's the budget, here's how we're paying people. You may have to make some local decisions about whether you report the secretary's salary. Pastors have no choice in that because the salary has to be approved by the congregation. And so it's usually just, here it is. Here's what I make every year. Thank you. You know, that has to be laid out. But anyway, give it to the congregation.
Ken, I think you mean the salary has to be approved by the session, not the
Oh, the salary of the pastor has to be approved by the congregation.
Correct.
So
Secretary is by the, yeah.
yeah, presbytery and the presbytery. Oh, yes, thank you. I'm so locked in. The pastor's salary has to be approved by the congregation, right? And so that needs to be reported. The whole budget, no hidden agendas, no slush fund hidden over here that the congregation doesn't know about. I think the Book of Order actually says the full and complete financial of the church should be presented to the congregation. We like to encourage people to serve in the life of the church, and so we need a nominating committee to do that. And so the congregation should elect a nominating committee. And some can do it every year. They can serve 3 years or 6 years. However you want to do it is fine. Most churches follow the model that we follow for ruling elders and deacons, where you can serve on the nominating committee up to 6 years. If your bylaws are different, that's fine. Just make sure it's codified and that is reflected in your minutes. The congregation elected these 3 individuals to serve in the nominating committee for the class of 2022 or 2023. The minutes of all congregational meetings should be signed by you if you're the clerk, right? That's another of those attestation things, right? Important for the approval of any terms of call or changes in terms of call for any pastors, associate pastors, or pastors. And technically, these also have to be approved by the presbytery. And so COVID has given us a big headache with that. So we're going to kind of do an automatic approval for everybody who are installed pastors and associate pastors. We want to try to do a better job in 2021. So we will be asking you all to report to the presbytery any changes in terms of call for your pastors for the year 2021. Because just like when you get a pastor, it's a 3-way call, right? The individual feels the call of the Spirit and wants to serve. A community of God's people, the congregation in most cases, and a council of the church concurring with that, and in this case, that'd be the presbytery, right? Concurs with the call to your pastor. Any changes in the terms of those calls requires kind of, the 3-way approval. Obviously, the pastor has to say yes. The congregation needs to vote to make those changes, and the presbytery needs to concur with that. And then finally, friends, we are almost done, I think. Review of any actions or changes in the church bylaws requires the congregation's approval. I want to encourage 41 that you all make sure your church is listed in the Secretary of the State of Illinois list of corporations. Some churches are listed and incorporated by what was called the Religious Incorporation Act of 1878 or 18 something. That's great. I want to encourage you to make sure you're also listed on the Secretary of the State of Illinois list of corporations. That was so vital when we did this PPE or PPP payroll protection stuff, and other churches are also applying for other federal funds through the Small Business Administration. You have to show that you are incorporated, and the fastest way to do that, you go online, you type in Secretary of State, you get it, you search for your corporate name. If you don't find it there, take some steps to become incorporated and listed with the state. I think might be $150 initial charge, and then it's so much a year. But I think that's
like only $10 a year.
Yeah, it's vitally important.
Yeah.
And you update it, right? Update it.
And if you haven't done it in a while and you find out you're way behind in paying your $10 fees, the state is pretty forgiving. They're just trying to get you up to date and reinstated.
You want to be up to date. And if you need help with that, email me. I can show you the website. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, and finally, page 4. Here we go. Your church register. Again, I know we can save things electronically. The Historical Society of the Church loves paper. And there's a book, I think it costs about $300. It's not cheap, but it is it's called the Westminster Church Register book, available from Cokesbury. Email me, I could send you that. Most of you all have them, I know. There, oh, thank you, Ed, that's it. The Church Register, how official looking is that? Okay, so obviously you have the role of active members, all right? Chronologically, just give them a number, and by last name, right? So you have that cross-check. You want to have updated roles of baptized members. Okay, now this is, we can get this mixed up sometimes. The role of baptized members should be every individual who is active in the life and ministry of your church, who has been baptized but has not been confirmed or has not joined the church on the active role. So for example, young children who were baptized, right, who were not yet confirmation age, they would be listed on your roll of baptized members. Sometimes we have people in the life of the church who are very active as adults. They were baptized as children, but they have not yet joined as active members your particular congregation. We might call them friends of the church. They can also be listed on the roll of baptized members because they're baptized, right? But they're not yet on the roll of active members. They've not made a personal confession in front of your community of faith, right? Or transferred their membership from another church into your church, but they can certainly be listed on the roll of baptized members. Perfectly fine, list them there, you know. What this list is not it's a list of those baptized this year. Sometimes congregations and clerks get confused and they say, oh, our baptized roll is 3 because we get 3 baptisms this year. No. Your baptized roll should be a collective roll of all of those who are active in the life of the church, who've been baptized, but have not yet been confirmed. Ed, I saw you waving.
On the subject of removing names from that list, we just went through an exercise where we removed 17 names because we haven't seen the child since it was baptized.
Right.
Parents have disappeared. We don't have addresses. They have no contact with the church, and they're at least 15 years old.
There you go. That's perfectly understandable and fine. Yeah.
So that's just a strike through. Remove.
That's right. Just remove. Yeah. Now you don't erase them. Don't erase anybody, right? Just put a note. Remove from baptized roll and the date of the session action. Yeah. Same thing with taking active members off. Now the Book of Order does say, like we saw earlier, you want to make effort to restore, right, inactive people who are listed on the active roll, but they're not really participating. You want to make effort. When you remove those folks, you have to provide notice. That's the only difference. So if you're taking someone off the active roll, and usually you do this in stages, you would review the roll and say, gee, we haven't seen so-and-so and so-and-so. Let's contact them in some way. Say we've missed them. Say we're reviewing our rolls. Add in that, you know, we're continuing to pay per capita for your membership. We are just inquiring if you would like to remain a member, if you would like to support the per capita, or if you would like to be removed, or if you've decided to take up the work of a disciple in this other church, you know, the Methodist Church or the Willow Creek or wherever. We just like to know that. And so most times, as you know, you will not get a response from those letters. I don't know what the ratio is, but it's pretty low. And then you just take the appropriate action, whatever that individual would like. So we also have a role called the affiliate role, and this is a very small role usually. This would be, I live in Chicago and my church membership is here, but I'm blessed enough to also have a home or a rental place in Florida or another city. I live in Chicago, but my home church is in Cincinnati, and I have a lot of ties there and family there. So I want to be an affiliate member of the Cincinnati church, okay? Or the opposite, someone is a member of the Cincinnati church, but they live and work here in Chicago, and they want to be active at your church, and they want to somehow show that they are an active participant in your church, even though their membership is in their home church in Cincinnati, you can make them an affiliate member of your church. And you just list them in the book and in your session minutes, of course, right? We want to keep an accurate list of ruling elders and deacons and their installation and ordination dates. And that's just important for historical, accuracy and to know, right? Well, I think I was ordained a deacon. Well, here we can look it up. We've got it in the book. Pastors and associate pastors, you could also include interim pastors, whatever you want to include, but some listing of those individuals who are serving you all as an installed pastor, associate pastor, or in some temporary interim relationship. And then very important, really, and this is the last one, I think, yes, up-to-date record of baptisms and the date of birth and the names of parents. The state is very accepting of records that churches have had historically when baptismal records, when birth records or birth certificates are destroyed or can't be found. Many times the church will be contacted. Can you verify the birth date of so-and-so who is applying for Social Security retirement, for example, and they accept the state accepts our records. So I've made copies of those and sent them on. So just important to have that in your church registry. Okay, 2 minutes, friends. You all have been great. Any final questions or wrap up? Maggie, I'll turn it over to you.
Unfortunately, I have a 12 o'clock Zoom, so I do have to run. I was going to put up on the screen what the next steps are, but we did send that out to you. So I'm not going to do that on the screen. I would just advise you that when you feel like you've finished your church review up through December 31, 2019, then let Ken or me know, and then we'd like to pair you up with a clerk from another session who has also finished their review. And then we'd like you to have a conversation about both the process, the outcome, and some of the things that you have learned. And so it's not a formal thing, but once that's done, we will assume that your minutes are approved. And then Ken is going to send out a letter to you just by notifying us that you are done and you've had your conversation with another clerk. Then we will send you a letter that you can put into your minutes. Or as Ken has said, or I can send you a page with a stamp on it.
Good housekeeping seal of approval. I can send you that page. But
Right.
Somehow, as Maggie says, either we'll set it up on a Zoom or you sit down with another person, right? Someone else in your church, and just go through your list, go through your minutes. Let us know that you faithfully did that, and we will consider your minutes approved.
And just so you know, I just put a filter on my page so you can see I'm now talking to you from my old television set. I'm pretty available. Like, I'm not full-time employed anywhere like Chris and Ken. So if you want help, you want me to facilitate, you want me to set up the Zoom meeting, I can do all that stuff for you. It's really not a big deal. And it gives me meaning. I've got something to do. So I don't know if you're like me, but before we go, I want to ask somebody to close us in prayer, and I'm just going to get a little goofy and give you a different filter so you can see some of the things you can do on Zoom that you didn't know about.
So there you go,
So who would like to close us in prayer?
We're not going to answer you looking like that, Maggie. I'm sorry. It's just not going to.
All right. I'll go take it off. It's my favorite, though.
Yeah. And let me just say, after we close with prayer, I'll hang on the meeting a little bit. Chris and I can hang a few more minutes. Maggie has to go.
That would be great.
If there are any last minute questions, ask them then. Okay. Anybody want to close? Please,
Paul?
Brother Paul.
Loving God, you know the number of hairs on our head. You are acquainted with detail. We give you thanks for the leadership that we've had this morning. We give you thanks that you have called us to be part of the leadership of your church. We ask that you would bless each of us and the congregations represented here, that we would fulfill our call with joy and with intelligence, imagination, enthusiasm, and love. Bless us as we go into this day. In Jesus' name, amen.